So our Unitarian Universalist faith was formed through the consolidation of two religious traditions, Unitarianism and Universalism. And although Universalism was not recognized as a Christian denomination in this country until 1793, its roots are much older, going all the way back to early Christian theologians like Origen of Alexandria of the 3rd century CE. Although Universalism as a living tradition changed over the decades, one unbroken thread was the idea that there is no hell. Using reason, early Universalists realized that no loving, all-powerful God would damn human beings to eternal suffering for their finite mistakes. So as our reading today, here are some quotes from some prominent Universalist figures across the centuries. We begin with Hosea Ballou from 1805, who wrote, "The ideas that sin is infinite and that it deserves an infinite punishment, that the law transgressed is infinite and inflicts an infinite penalty, are ideas which appear to me to be unfounded in the nature of reason and unsupported by divine revelation." Lucy Barnes in 1809 wrote, quote, "The scriptures declare that God is love, that God is a good being, and that God has all power in his own hand. So is it possible that so good, so kind, and loving a parent can punish his tender and beloved offspring with the most exquisite misery to the endless ages of eternity?" Quillen Shin, who's one of my heroes, a Universalist circuit riding minister, preached in 1900, quote, "The doctrine of endless brutality, politely called eternal punishment, must be utterly abhorrent to every thinking mind. How sad to hear good, kind-hearted people say they believe it. When we ask them how they expect to be happy in heaven when their fellow men and possibly their own loved ones are suffering in torment and doomed to suffer endless pain, they answer, 'Oh, we will be so changed.' This is the saddest thing I've ever heard. It means a world of eternal heartlessness. I ask, would you not 10,000 times rather be an asbestos sinner in the lowest hell with some feeling left than to be a petrified saint in heaven?" Unquote. Social justice warrior, Universalist minister Clarence Skinner wrote in 1915, quote, "Universalism triumphantly holds to the universal salvation of all mankind. It believes that all human souls are children of God, with a spark of the divine in their nature, and that eventually those souls will reach a perfect harmony with God." And finally, these words are from Carlton Pearson, who was a Pentecostal megachurch pastor who rejected the idea of eternal hell, and he was ostracized by his own community. He brought the remaining members of his congregation to All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he became an affiliate minister there until his death less than 3 years ago. There's a funny connection there because it was attending his funeral that I ran into Doug Inhofe, who told me about the opening at this congregation. So again, it's all a cycle. Bishop Pearson wrote, I do believe in hell as a state of being or consciousness. And I believe that people can dwell in hell, and that many do right now, today, on this earth, before rather than after death. We may go through hell, but nobody goes to hell. Unquote. So I invite you now to join me in a Buddhist Tonglen, or taking and sending meditation. So taking a comfortable seat, whatever that means for you. And you might want to have your eyes closed or just softly focused. And I invite you to do something a little counterintuitive. I invite you to bring to mind all of those heavy thoughts that are swirling around you now. I know I'm thinking a lot about the Supreme Court decision gutting the Voting Rights Act, what's going on with abortion access in this country, what's happening to our climate. And then, of course, so many of us have personal heaviness. Go ahead and breathe those things in. And on the exhale, I invite you to breathe out lightness. And I invite you to bring to mind someone who today, in this lifetime, feels that they are going through hell. It may be the hell of addiction or of chronic pain. It may be the hell of seeing a loved one lose their memories to dementia. It may be the hell of poverty or of hunger. It may be the hell of incarceration or detention in an ICE camp. You might bring to mind a specific person you know who is going through this kind of experience. You might even recognize yourself as this person. Or it might be a more abstract thought. Maybe you can bring into your heart someone who is experiencing the hell of war, a person you've never met in a distant country. And in a spirit of self-compassion, not taking on more than you are able to hold, I invite you to imagine that you are taking in this person's pain. Breathing in, we take in another's suffering. And then breathing out, we breathe out peace. We breathe out solace. We breathe out kindness. Breathing in, we take in someone's hell. Breathing out, we send out love. Now I invite you to expand your consciousness beyond one person to all of the people who might be in a similar situation. And again, breathe in their pain and breathe out peace. Breathe in their hell. Breathe out love. Taking a few more breaths in and out. And before you come back, sending love back to your own heart and peace to your own heart. And then coming back into this space and time. By all accounts, Roman Emperor Nero was not a good person. When his mother disapproved of an affair he was having, he tried to kill her 5 times. 3 times by poison, once by arranging to have the ceiling drop on her head while she was sleeping, and once by putting her in a leaky boat and sending her out to sea. Each time she somehow managed to survive. Finally, he hired an assassin to club and stab her to death. In his book, When Good Things Happen to Bad People, author Martin Levinson goes on to describe how Nero kicked his wife to death and how he fed some Christians to the lions while others he crucified and set on fire to use as torches around his palace. He even went so far as to cheat in the Olympic Games and got away with it, being declared the winner of a chariot race after he had managed to fall out of the chariot. When the people rose up and it seemed he would finally pay for his lifetime of misdeeds, he beat them to the punch by killing himself. Remorseless until the end, his last words being, "Jupiter, what an artist the people lose in me." Fast forward a little less than 2,000 years. And we find multi-millionaire Jeffrey Epstein, a serial sex offender who trafficked young girls to his wealthy and powerful friends. In the end, he spent only 13 months in a private wing of the Palm Beach County Jail with work release. When he was arrested a second time, and it seemed that finally he might receive punishment for his crimes, he died in his jail cell before he could face trial, with his death declared a suicide. And we're left to wonder, did Epstein feel remorse or regret at the time of his death? We have no way of knowing. Somehow, though, it seems unlikely. And then there's his associate in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but who now sits in a minimum security facility where, according to a whistleblower, she has special privileges. There are the nearly 1,600 insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, including hundreds who were convicted of assaulting law officers who were issued blanket clemency. And then, of course, there is the convicted felon and sexual abuser who became President of the United States. In some ways, it seems that little has changed since the time of Nero. Every day, we witness crimes going unpunished, and wealthy narcissists, white supremacists, and Christian nationalists remaining untouched by justice, which only affirms their sense of superiority and moral impunity. Faced with this injustice, many of us fall back into hopes of karmic comeuppance. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but someday, those corrupt bankers greedy tech bros, corporate polluters, crooked politicians, sexual harassers and abusers, racist bullies, and people who harm children will live to regret their crimes. Surely there ought to be some kind of reckoning. This is exactly the moral quandary that the concept of hell was designed to address. Imagine that you are one of those early Christians facing the bloody jaws of a lion in the arena, knowing that your loved ones are next in line or are already burning like lanterns around the lush home of a monster who cannot be touched in this lifetime. There would be some comfort in believing that you would see all of your loved ones again in heaven, but how much more comfort might be found in imagining Nero paying for his crimes, not just once, but for all eternity. Wouldn't that feel like justice? The problem is that justice can be a slippery thing. For 3rd century Christian patriarch Tertullian, for example, justice meant eternal punishment, not just for those who opposed the church, but for all of those so-called demented and insane people who were something other than the right kind of Christian. Over the centuries, hell would be used not only as a threat, a way to scare people into obedience, but as a justification for all kinds of cruelty. What was a little torture in this life, after all, compared to an eternity of being boiled in oil or suffocating on sulfurous fumes and being torn apart by demons, snakes, lions, dogs, dragons, and 3-headed beasts? And if God was so merciless that he could damn people to hell forever just for the sin of being different, then certainly mere humans couldn't be blamed for judging one another in the same. But from the early days of the Christian church, there were people who thought differently. Around the same time that Tertullian was damning non-Christians to eternity of suffering with no hope for redemption, a Christian scholar named Origen of Alexandria was arguing that maybe hell wasn't forever. After all, he argued, wouldn't a loving God want to be reunited with all of his children eventually? Over time, those Christians who argued that no child of God could ever be eternally lost to God became known as Universalists because they believed in the ultimate salvation of all people, a universal salvation. In the United States, in the late 18th and 19th centuries, Universalists appealed to reason and logic to argue against the idea of eternal damnation. They argued that if God was truly perfect and loving, but allowed humans to suffer in hell forever, then it could only mean one of two things. Either God wants to save everyone but can't, in which case God hardly qualifies as all-powerful, or God can save everyone, but doesn't want to. In which case, God is a jerk, to say the least. While some Universalists held on to the idea of hell as a kind of afterlife reform school, where wrongdoers could think about and repent of their crimes before achieving salvation, the mainstream Universalist abandoned the idea of hell entirely. Universalism became the no hell faith. And if there is no hell, and everyone is going to spend eternity together, then, as one 20th century universalist put it, we'd better start by figuring out how to get along here on earth. Promoting social justice and equality for all people then was just an extension of universalist theology. The Universalists were one of the first religious groups in the United States to take a stand against slavery. They were one of the first to ordain women as ministers and to admit women to their college. They were one of the first faith groups to oppose the death penalty, to promote the possibility of parole, and to fight for prison reform. But here's the thing about fighting for social justice. You quickly begin to realize that, as the pigs proclaim in George Orwell's Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Which is to say that some of us carry privilege that we have done nothing to deserve. Some white folks terrorize and oppress black folks and still get bridges named after them and statues erected in their honor. Some men assault women and still get elected to office. Some rich folks steal from the poor and just keep getting richer. And some people really do get away with murder, including murder on a mass scale. And once again, we're back to where we started, asking, when will there be justice? Now, some of us who don't believe in eternal damnation find solace in a belief in reincarnation, or the view that those whose misdeeds and failings in this lifetime will, go unpunished will be castigated in some way in their next life. But we need look no further than the plight of the Dalits or the so-called untouchables in India to see the potentially oppressive danger embedded within this concept. And then there's hope. The kind of hope illustrated in Reverend Martin Luther King's famous quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." These words are, of course, affirming and inspiring. But I am far from the first to point out that they aren't necessarily true, because there is no inevitable bend toward justice. We can only bend the arc with a firm and unyielding push. Will we see justice in our lifetimes? I don't know. But I do know this: we will never see it if what we mean by justice is really punishment. Because justice isn't served by revenge or the threat of hell or even karma. It is served by love. I'm not saying that there should not be standards of conduct or that bad behavior should be excused. When it comes to those basic guidelines of participation in society, those things we learned in childhood, like don't steal, don't lie, don't beat up your siblings, don't expect someone else to clean up your mess, and always try to be kind. Those are valid expectations. But when a person falls from this path, our society, including both perpetrators and victims of wrongdoing, may be best served by focusing on accountability and reconciliation, striving to repair the harm that was done, rather than just insisting that the guilty suffer. And I believe this: we can fixate on injustice, unfairness, and the lack of punishment to such an extent that the only hell anyone experiences is the one we are inflicting upon ourselves. The alternative is a hard path, my friends, but it is a beautiful path of meaning that may indeed bend toward justice. We travel the path fueled not by hunger for punishment, but by love. Love for our fellow beings, for our fellow humans, those who are already here and those not yet born, for our world, for all that is good and life affirming. That path takes us out into the highways and byways where we can give people a new vision, a vision that brings more light and understanding to the hearts of all people, a vision not of hell, but of hope and courage, of kindness and everlasting love. Spirituals that were sung by enslaved people were not written to be art. They were sung as a kind of public groaning. They were sung to communicate secret messages about escape. Spirituals offered hope and life. And when enslaved people sang about heaven, it was partly about the afterlife and partly about freedom in this lifetime. In just a moment, we'll sing hymn number 211 in the hymnal, We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder. As an African American spiritual, it has multiple levels of meaning. On one hand, it's a song about one of the patriarchs of the Hebrew scriptures, Jacob, who has a dream in which God reiterates his promise to bring his chosen people into a place of freedom and prosperity. But on the other hand, it is a coded message of encouragement, sung by people who were not allowed to speak to each other. Stay alive, they sing to each other. We can climb out of this hell. Please rise in body or in spirit. If I stumble, will you help me? If I stumble, will you help me? If I stumble, will you help me? We are climbing on. Oh, the road is steep and rugged. Oh, the road is steep and rugged. Oh, the road is steep and rugged. be seated. And I invite you to remain seated through the postlude, taking a moment of peace before going back out into the busy world. Our closing words are by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford. She writes, "The hell is all around, and we work in great passionate swoops and in slow plodding routines to put extravagant love into action and to remove all the bits of it from the world. Misery, ill health, disease, viciousness of greed in the face of want, voices that shout hate or whisper meanness, injustice that curls up nastily, poisoning the spirit of giver and receiver, we do not flee. Bone-chillingly afraid we may be, but we step forward. We are the only form love will take, and the work is ours to do. We are here to love the hell out of this world." Please join me in saying the words as we extinguish our chalice. They're printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As you go from this place today, all your thoughts, your words, and actions, may you be guided by a fierce love. May you remember that you are here to love the hell out of this world. May it be so.